Hi, I'm Nigel Brockton, Vice President of Research at the American Institute for Cancer Research.
And I'm Karen Collins, Registered Dietitian Nutritionist and Nutrition Advisor to the American Institute for Cancer Research. Amidst all the mixed messaging in the news about things that you should and shouldn't eat after a diagnosis of cancer, whether it's soy or dairy or asparagus or other things in what you eat, or things outside of diet like hair dyes and microwaves, there's just so much noise. It can be hard to know what you should trust as a basis for making lifestyle decisions. One of the things we've learned is that it's so important not to jump to single individual studies, but to look at the big picture of overall research that we can get from careful analysis by the American Institute for Cancer Research expert report and recommendations. That's really such an important message, don't you think?
Absolutely. People will often fixate more so on things that they feel they can't control, because then it's out of their control, they don't have to concern themselves with it. But our message is, these are things that you can control, your lifestyle choices. And there's a thing called attributable risk, which is to work out how much a certain factor is associated with, mainly with incidence of cancer. So many of the factors that people traditionally think of as being risk factors for cancer, air pollution, pesticides, have very, very low attributable risk and sort of level of confidence that those are strong carcinogens in populations. But we know things like physical activity, controlling body weight, and diet do have a big effect, and those are the things that people should be focusing on. The problem is, you have individual studies coming out, and AICR has spent the last 30 years analyzing the totality of evidence. And we started off back in, the first expert report came out in 1997, and the availability of evidence was pretty low. I mean, there was enough to try and get some consensus, and the fact that we have pretty much the same conclusions 20 plus years later suggests we were on the right track. But we are very transparent about how we approach this, and when we have low confidence in a body of research, we'll state that. But as the data and evidence has improved and the quality has improved, and you can look at all the sort of criticisms of case control studies back in the 90s to now cohort studies through the 2000s, an increasing number where available of randomized control trials, which is very much an experimental approach. The volume of evidence and the quality of the evidence has improved. So we know these are the factors that have a big impact, and it's really important that people don't get kind of distracted by the shiny object of the new study, because if it's contrary to what we know to be the case, or what the settled science is, or the consensus is, then it does lead to that sort of research fatigue of people that will just then say, well, nobody seems to know, I'm just going to give up and cuddle my bad habits.
Well, that's such an important point. When I talk to people outside the research community, because of all these headlines, and the whole reason headlines are written that way, they sometimes call them clickbait headlines. They particularly pose them in ways that would be surprising or shocking to you, because the goal is for you to click and read that report. If it were yet another study confirms what we've been saying, nobody's interested. But so they see these headlines and they say, but science is just flip-flopping back and forth. And I say, it's not science that's flip-flopping back and forth. Headlines are flip-flopping back and forth. In the research community, there's been a really consistent thread, right?
But even within the research, yes, there is.
I mean, we learn more all the time. But
for the factors that we advocate, it's very consistent. And we have very strict criteria for how we decide whether something is strong evidence or not. But there are always studies coming out that may not show the same effect or may even show an alternative effect. But the scientists look at that and look at the strengths and weaknesses of that study, and if it's something that would undermine our confidence in our current assessment, then that would get integrated into that analysis. But when these are reported in the lay press, none of those caveats are.
It's just that it's new,
presented.
and new is always better.
Yeah.
What are some of the reasons you think that are some of the, what's behind some of these studies that occasionally do come out? They make big headlines showing sort of an opposite. I mean, there's things about dose that's used or the way things are analyzed or something, right? That sometimes it's the way the study's done or reported that results in these findings.
There are lots of factors you can look at in a research study. Yeah. Is it in humans is one of the key ones. Because as one of my colleagues used to say, we're very successful at curing cancer in mice. So just because something works either on cells, we do, in our bodies, and for cancer cells in our bodies, we don't pour factors onto those cells. They have to be absorbed, they have to not have the toxicity. So when people say that either something causes cancer or it cures cancer, just because it did that in a Petri dish can give us mechanistic insights, but does not suggest that this is some secret source.
It doesn't prove it.
No,
in humans.
Absolutely. So understanding how the study was done, understanding the size of the study in terms of the number of people involved, the specific population, do they have any specific susceptibility? The quality of the data collection. There are many, many factors which, unless you're reading the primary study, it's really difficult for the layperson to assess that information accurately. That is why AICR does the continuous update project to look at all these factors. And for those that are interested, we have our website, which has the sort of matrices that shows the risks and what are the factors that are strongly associated with cancer and individual cancer types. Then there are the reports, which dig into some of the more details. Then we have our systematic literature reviews, which are, some of them are 2,000 pages long. But if there's factors that you're particularly interested in, at least the assessment of the evidence related to that factor will be in there. And there may be very little, and in which case that's important to know as well, because what we're giving the message that people are looking at it, but we haven't done enough work to be able to say whether it's good or bad. So you wouldn't take an unproven drug. So why would you put your faith in a food item or some factor that is also unproven? So I know we're asking people to take a leap of faith and take our word for it, but we spell out all of the approaches that are taken in how to try and make it easier for people to understand what the research is actually showing us.
Yes, I really encourage people. You can't help it. You're inundated by these headlines, and it's just so much noise. It can be really hard to make sense of things. But as you said, if you're not going to be able to go, if you don't have access to the study, if you don't have the time or the inclination to try and sift through this with a scientific knowledge base like a researcher would have, then I think in addition to the continuous update report and those kind of findings, I think AICR offers a great service by the ability to sign up to get the research update, to get a recharge, to get some of these email, e-news, AICR e-news, that will take what's hot, what's a current content, but put it, as you said, in the perspective of what is in the context of what we already know. So that then you can know you're getting insights on these things from a reliable source. And that way, if you sign up to get it directly, you can find it on the website, But if you sign up, you can get it directly to your email inbox, and then you know you're always getting the latest updates. And to me, that's an incredibly valuable service AICR offers.
And the more of that information you have, and the more of those kind of blogs and things that you read, which try to inform about how to assess the veracity of any research, I think there's a learning that happens where people are like, oh, I've seen this before, or I've seen this approach before, and recognize the weaknesses. And knowledge is power. So yeah, we spend a lot of our time trying to help people understand the strengths and the weaknesses of the research out there, and not get distracted by whatever that shiny object is of the day. And how does it fit into the bigger picture of all the evidence that we have and the decisions that people should prioritize to make?
Right. We only have so much energy, right? Yeah. It takes energy to make a behavior change. It takes energy to maintain a new habit. And given that, you want to know that you're putting your energy into the things that really make a difference. And what we've seen is that when people come closer to the recommendations, that does make a difference, right?
Absolutely. We have 10 recommendations, 10 cancer prevention recommendations, and we know that each of those recommendations is based on the impact of those individual recommendations, but as a whole, when we look at adherence to the package of recommendations, higher adherence to the recommendations dramatically reduces your cancer risk and improves your outcome after a cancer diagnosis. So the more you can do, and to steal your phrase of we're seeking, in fact, I'm going to let you say it.
Progress, not perfection.
Any changes you can make will improve your health and reduce your risk. It's not about perfection. You can strive for perfection, but we know that adhering more to the recommendations has a big impact on reducing your risk of cancer and improving outcomes after diagnosis. And that research is really, particularly over the last 10 years, has really taken the recommendations and assessed how effective they are, and they work.
And I think one of the important messages that's come from that research is it's not only when you're getting those in place perfectly, that's the sort of the blueprint of the lifestyle you're aiming for, but that it's not only those people who've got it all the way that are doing better, it's each step closer to those recommendations.
Yeah,
that makes a difference.
A lot of these have used a score, and in fact AICR worked with the National Cancer Institute last year to develop a standardized score that people could use. So you're talking like and it's a 7-point score, and those who are at the 5 to 7 are much better than the 3 or 4 and under. So it's nobody's scoring a 10. Yeah.
But if you're telling me I'm just 2 points better and you can have some better outcomes, that seems so much more motivational to me than when I look way ahead and see what could seem like out of reach.
And there's a great tool on the AICR website, the Cancer Health Check, which it's just 7-8 questions to assess where you are in terms of your weight, your physical activity, your dietary choices, and it'll give you a score and give you advice on where you can improve and where just keep going with the choices you're making. So.
Exactly. I like that. It doesn't only just give you the score, but it does really give you some tips that can help you take it one step closer and figure out some options, because we all have choices.
Yeah.
I hope this discussion has been helpful to you, and that you will use all of these resources that are available on the AICR website.